I always had a dream of living in a different country, experiencing a different culture, seeing the world from a different worldview or perspective. Well, in 2019, we got the chance to try that when we got to move to Germany. But well, we ended up here. Yeah, we are actually in Germany. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am Donnie, and along with my wife Aubrey, we are two Americans currently living in Germany with our family, sharing all of our experiences living and traveling throughout Europe. It seems like many cities around the world will have a neighborhood with a high concentration of one ethnic group, and it'll get a nickname like Chinatown or Little Italy. So I always kind of wondered if somewhere in the world had a Little America where you could sit in a diner, listen to country music, have endless refills, watch medication commercials on TV, and sales tax wouldn't be included in prices. However, these types of neighborhoods are mostly set up in places of large immigration, and the US historically is made up of immigrants and not one that traditionally moves away from the US. However, although Americans don't typically move out of the US on their own free will in droves and set up little American enclaves in foreign countries, what is the US good at? Yup, one of America's greatest exports is a good old dose of freedom. After the war, Germany was divided up into 4 occupation zones, and in the French zone, they started building an air base. This base eventually became what is today known as Ramstein Air Base, a massive NATO military base where the largest numbers of American military personnel outside of the US are stationed. Today, there are about 50 to 60,000 Americans living in the area that are military members, their families, civilian government employees, or odd ducks like us who happen to find a job near the base and are here not associated with the government or military at all directly. There are many US military installations throughout Germany, but nothing near as large as this one, which has created a unique situation some call
Little USA.
So we are in a unique situation where we kind of have a foot in both countries. On one hand, we have German work visas in order to be allowed to live in Germany. We have German friends. I speak German. I've even applied for German citizenship. And even though we are Americans, we aren't allowed on the military base unless we have someone who has access to the base sign us on and escort us around. So we have one foot firmly in Germany, and we kind of are on the outside looking in at Ramstein Air Base. However, the American influence doesn't just stay on base. Many, if not most Americans here live off base in the surrounding communities. And to be honest, our American friend circle is bigger than our German friend group. Most German businesses and even government services are used to dealing with Americans and will often just go ahead and just speak English with us and at a greater rate than in other parts of Germany. And we don't go on base often, and part of that is because we've said we've moved to Germany to live in Germany, so we don't necessarily want the comforts of home that we can find on base. But every once in a while, we might want big mouth bites and a strawberry lemonade from Chili's or a stomach ache from Taco Bell, and we do have someone sign us on. So in a way, we still have one foot still in America and honestly aren't as fully immersed in Germany as we could be if we lived in another part of Germany and what we originally set out to experience. Real quick guys, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like and subscribe button, that would be a huge support to my channel. And I want to give a special shout out to my patrons over on Patreon, my YouTube channel members, and those that leave super thanks on my videos. Your support means a lot to me being able to bring you this content, and I want you to know how truly appreciative I actually am. Now, there are a couple of important distinctions that need to be made clear about Ramstein Air Base. Depending on your politics, you might debate the relationship between Germany and Ramstein Air Base, but the fact is, the US doesn't operate there because they are still occupying Germany after World War II. It does get a bit complicated. Unlike other military bases around the world, which is actually considered American soil, Ramstein is not American owned.
Manchmal fällt der Begriff extraterritorial, der ist falsch. Es ist nicht irgendwie außerirdisch, sondern es ist Deutschland. Und es gilt dort auch deutsches Recht.
Babies born on base to Americans are treated as babies born on German soil and aren't given American citizenship right there in the hospital room, or of course, German citizenship either, by the way. They have to go through the same process as us to declare a birth abroad through the US consulates in Germany, although they get an express way of doing it that we don't benefit from. Ramstein technically is German land and a German base that they have agreements with NATO so that it may operate on it. This is why it's called Ramstein Air Base and not Ramstein Air Force Base, as if it would be if it was American military owned actually. And although this is a NATO base, for sure the US makes up the largest majority of troops, but you will find military personnel and their families from all over NATO countries in the area, making it really quite diverse around here. So in a way, that makes the term Little America also make sense, considering the US is also made up of so many different diverse cultures as an immigrant nation. But what's the base like, and how much of American culture bleeds out into the surrounding community to give it the nickname Little USA? Well, when you step on base, it does feel like you are stepping into the US, but with a heavy military presence, of course. All the street names are American street names. They have American restaurants you can't get in Germany, an American shopping mall, bowling alley, golf course, gas stations, movie theater, grocery stores, American high schools, and more. Interestingly, you will also find restaurants on base that you can find in Germany, like Burger King, which feels kind of like a waste, as if they should have brought in a restaurant like Sonic that you can't get in Germany, until you realize that it is the same restaurant in name, but the menu is completely different from a German one because they have the American menus on base. The base also doesn't have to follow the same German rules, and just like in the US, the grocery stores are open on Sundays, and the Americans are able to get their shopping done that day as if they aren't living in Germany at all. Of course, the dollar is used instead of the euro on base, and there are some quirks, like if you go see a movie on base, you have to stand and sing the American national anthem before the movie starts. This isn't something that happens in the US, by the way, and as weird as that sounds to Germans, is just as weird to us and even to the military members who see it for the first time. But since we don't have access to the base except on rare occasions where someone escorts us on, we don't get the full-on feeling we are living in the US, I guess. However, American culture also does bleed out into the community as Germans try and capitalize, I think, primarily on American government money flowing in the area. Our German grocery store, like Edeka, will bring in special items for the Americans in the area, like turkeys around Thanksgiving times, whereas in the rest of Germany, turkeys aren't super common to find. Even our local newspaper has a special English section of the paper just so the Americans in the area can get some idea of what's going on in the community. When we drive around, we honestly see way more American flags than you will ever see of German flags. An interesting thing also happens every day at 5 p.m. If you're in a village close enough to the base, you'll hear the American national anthem and the German national anthem blast on speakers. Just like there's food on base that you just simply can't get in Germany, off base, there's also a lot of food options that you can't find in the rest of Germany because Americans have brought their influence into the area. For example, one of the biggest complaints of Americans in Germany is the lack of good Mexican food. However, the secret is it's all right here. Because of the Americans in the area, we have multiple Mexican restaurants that are fairly decent. Or perhaps since we've been living in Germany, our standards have just lowered and we've convinced ourselves that they're good. There's also some great restaurants that flatter big chains in the US that aren't in Germany by imitating their business models, making us feel like we can get them in Germany. And much to many Germans' horror, there are a couple of restaurants that even give free refills on drinks around here, something that is blasphemous in the rest of Germany. The German and American communities also aren't like oil and water, where you have a distinct division between the two. It's really common in our area to find mixed German-American families, or I'll come across a German, speak German to them, and then I'll hear them speaking with an American and they'll have an accent-free American English, and I'll find out they had an American dad and a German mom, for example. The German community also does a good job at making the Americans feel welcome and involving them in community festivals. There will often be German-American friendship festivals. The German festivals will include lots of English spoken so that the Americans can understand what's going on. Or parades will often include American military bands marching and performing as well. All of this integration has its pros and cons for someone like us trying to experience life in Germany. Let me tell you, it's not easy to integrate and Germanize in this area. Across Germany, Germans have a relatively high level of English proficiency, particularly in younger demographics. However, I still come across many situations around other parts of Germany where I have to speak in German because the person I'm speaking to has limited English skills, or if I speak to them in German and they do speak English, they will happily speak in German with me because they can tell I do speak German. But even though I hold a C1 German certificate, when a German hears my accent in this area, they are used to the other 49,999 Americans here who learned the basics, Hallo and Danke, and assume I also won't really speak German and they will immediately speak English to me. Even if I stick in German, they will stick in English quite often, creating an awkward situation where this American is speaking German, that German is speaking English, and we just continue that way for the entire conversation. Another somewhat negative of the area is that rent prices for homes or apartments can be ridiculous. The American military community receives arguably ridiculously high stipends to pay for their rent. The local landlords know this and raise prices to absurd levels to take advantage of this. We personally know a landlord here who's a friend of ours who told us that they had a 1-bedroom apartment they were planning to rent for 600 or 700 euro, but when they went through the process to get it approved for military housing, the military housing office told them they had a soldier in mind for that unit, but he receives about 13 to 1,400 euro a month for housing, and that the landlord should just go ahead therefore and charge him that much. Otherwise, he would look for a different unit because they lose the balance of their rent stipend if they don't use it all. Therefore, we had to try and make it very clear to landlords here that we don't get the perks even though we're Americans, because we have no association with the government or military and we need more realistic rental prices. But as you can imagine, those German landlords aren't generally going to lower their rent simply because we don't get a housing allowance from the American government. They will just hold out their price and rent to someone that will pay it because they inevitably will have someone that will pay that price. Do all Germans appreciate that Americans are in the area? Of course not. There's a lot of controversy surrounding the base when it comes to the storage of nuclear weapons, drone attacks in the Middle East being coordinated from here, or even just the noise pollution created by the massive planes constantly flying. And I don't want to claim I've experienced any real discrimination, but I have had a few moments where, for example, once I was speaking English in the city with a friend and a man walked by and yelled at us to speak German. We've had people tell us Amis to go home. There are protests staged every year in our town against Americans, etc. However, I've talked with Germans in the area who have explained that without the American base here, this rural country part of Germany would be in a completely different economic state of existence without the billions of dollars the Americans alone spend in the German economy.
Jeder Handwerker, jeder Installateur, jeder Malerbetrieb zum Beispiel oder jedes kleine Geschäft, auch Bäckereibetriebe, Taxibetriebe, jeder hängt irgendwo indirekt natürlich von dem Flughafen ab, ganz klar. Ich würde jetzt mal sagen, die spielen hier in der Region die wirtschaftliche Rolle. Weil wenn sie hier den Stecker ziehen, dann werden wir hier sozialer Brennpunkt. Das muss man ganz klar sagen.
If you are not a resident of the EU and you come to the EU to travel and you purchase things, you pay VAT while you are here, but you can actually get a VAT refund on those goods that you purchase. However, an interesting aspect of the Americans that live in this area is that they actually don't have to pay VAT, even though they do reside within the EU or within Germany. So some people might live here, literally it could be for decades if they keep extending contracts and are able to stay here, but because of their special status of them living here but not being here like on German work visas or whatever, they can get VAT forms and get VAT refunds on everything they purchase. So another interesting thing that you find all throughout our area here are stores that will have signs that will say that you can get VAT forms accepted in that store, so you don't have to pay the added tax on those goods that you want to buy. This even includes like groceries. So our grocery stores all have signs on how the Americans can go and get that VAT refund on all their groceries that they purchase. Something that unfortunately we don't benefit from, since we are technically residents of Germany, even though we're Americans. It gets complicated. So how is life in Little America? Well, in many ways, it has great advantages because we are kind of living with one foot in each country and culture. We get access to some comforts of home if we ever need to cure a dose of homesickness, but we also get the great benefits of living in Germany, like getting German holiday time, healthcare, etc. There are, of course, cons that go with it as well, and although it isn't exactly the life we imagined our lives would be in Germany when we decided we wanted to move here, it certainly has been a very good life.
1, 2, 3.
We're moving to Germany! It's one of the very first times that we actually get to leave somewhere and then return to the same place. So we're super excited about that fact, that we can just leave most of our stuff in our house here, take a short ride over, spend a night in Paris, and then come right back. There is only one true king of bread in Europe, and it is not France. Very good. We are here with Deanna and Phil. I'm sure most of you guys have already checked out their channel.
Von Oklahoma in die Pfalz ausgewandert. Ihre Eindrücke von der deutschen Lebensart teilen die beiden US-Amerikaner in wöchentlichen Videos auf YouTube. Und mittlerweile haben sie auch eine große Fangemeinde.
Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. I am Donnie.
And I'm Aubrey.
And we are two Americans currently living in Germany. We are two Americans currently living in Germany with our baby. And we are two Americans currently living in Germany with our family, sharing all of our experiences living and traveling throughout Europe. To see who made it this far into the video, the random question of the week is: do you rinse the soap off of dishes after hand washing them, or wash them directly with soap and then set them on the drying rack with the soap suds still on it to dry? Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. Be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you in my next video. Oh, I just threw up in my mouth. Ugh.